Just a few weeks ago, I had the privilege of being invited to Japan by Grand Seiko to tour their manufacturing facilities and learn more about the brand. In the near future, I will have a more all encompassing recap on that experience, but in the meantime, I wanted to talk about a watch that I was able to wear and experience for the duration of the trip, the Grand Seiko Tentagraph. This will be a combination of a review of the watch, but will also include some of my experience as well. So it will be just a little bit different from my past reviews. But if you like this type of content, make sure to let me know. And of course, like the video and subscribe to my channel. So the morning after I arrived in Tokyo, I was brought to the famous and historic Seiko House in Ginza to kick off the press trip. Having just reviewed the SLGH005 White Birch just a few weeks prior, I don't think I could have been more ready for this trip. A few months prior, when I was filling out paperwork, Grand Seiko asked for my wrist size. So I was hoping that I would have the chance to wear something fun from the brand while I was in Japan. And I was definitely not disappointed. There were 7 members of the press on this trip, 3 of us from the US, all from New York to be exact, and 1 from the UK, and the rest from various parts of Asia. Since its release just last year, I've been wanting to review the Tentagraph, Grand Seiko's first self-winding mechanical chronograph. I noticed that the Grand Seiko press team had one Tentagraph to hand out, and it ended up being the watch that they assigned to me for the duration of the trip. I have to say that I was pretty happy. Now, that's a lot of background into my trip to Japan for what is ostensibly a watch review. But as I said, this review is going to be just a little bit different from my typical review. Because how often do you get to wear a Grand Seiko while in Japan and while visiting the very facility the watch was manufactured in? Not very often, especially if you're from the other side of the globe. Grand Seiko is known for having one of the best press trips in the watch industry, and I can't say that I disagree with that assessment, especially after my experience. Starting in Tokyo, we would make our way to Nagano, home to Seiko Epson, where all the quartz and spring drive Grand Seiko timepieces are manufactured, and then up north to Morioka, a city close to Grand Seiko's studio Shizukushi, where Grand Seiko's mechanical timepieces are produced. And while I brought 3 of my own watches, the Tentagraph was the only piece that graced my wrist for the duration of the trip. I must say that the Tentagraph was a great companion for my Japan travels. The lightweight, high-intensity titanium case makes it an easy wear, even with a 43mm case diameter. And while I don't have the exact grade of titanium, it's much higher quality than the grade 2 seen on more affordable titanium timepieces. In addition to making the watch 30% lighter than would be in stainless steel, the titanium case and bracelet gives the watch a much darker hue, which pairs well with the dark blue dial. And in case you're wondering, yes, both the case and bracelet feature Grand Seiko's signature Zaratsu polishing. But I'll note that the amount of polishing on the Tentagraph is significantly less than that of many of the other stainless steel watches, including the White Birch. The lugs are polished on the edges, and the bracelet has a polished chamfer on the outer links. But unlike the White Birch, the sides of the bracelet are brushed, not polished. I believe that Grand Seiko chose to do this to give the Tentagraph a more sporty look and feel. It is a racing chronograph made from titanium and with a tachometer, so this makes a lot of sense to me. And I don't really need to speculate that much on this. While I was in Japan, I was able to meet with Junichi Kamada, Grand Seiko's design director, and Akira Yoshida, a designer for Grand Seiko. These 2 men were responsible for designing the Tentagraph. When I first walked into our session with Mr. Kamada and Mr. Yoshida knowingly commented that he liked the watch on my wrist. I would actually only learn shortly thereafter that he designed the watch. Mr. Kamada told me that Grand Seiko's design ethos is that each Grand Seiko watch is designed to represent a unique sparkle based on the interplay of light and shadow. He went on to note that this idea formed the basis of the Grand Seiko style that originated in 1967. Clearly everything, including the polishing and brushing, is well thought out. In the case of the Tentagraph, less shadow should be cast on a clearly utilitarian sport watch. Now, when you look at a Tentagraph from afar, it might look like your typical blue sunray dial, but it's much more than that. The dial is inspired by Mount Iwate, which you can actually see from Grand Seiko Studio Shizukushi. I visited the studio, and it was somewhat of an oasis in the north of Japan. As many of you are aware, Grand Seiko's dials are inspired by nature. In conversation with Mr. Kamata, he noted that there were strict rules that he had to adhere to when designing for Grand Seiko. Yet these strict rules created an atmosphere that allowed him to be even more creative. When designing dials like the Tentagraphs, he looked at historic texts to help guide him in inspiration, including Sajiki, which is a dictionary of haikus where the poems are arranged by seasons. It was incredibly interesting to hear directly from the designers how they designed the watch that was on my wrist at the time. It gave me a greater appreciation for watch design, and the Tentagraph in particular. Moving beyond its inspiration, the dial is truly stunning. The pattern is more understated than that of other Grand Seiko dials, including the white birch, but it is incredibly detailed with hundreds, perhaps thousands of tiny contours. This gives depth and visual interest without reducing the chronograph's legibility. I appreciate Grand Seiko going that extra mile even if the result is only slightly noticeable from afar. The Tentagraph runs on the new in-house caliber 9SC5 high-beat chronograph movement. It's actually Grand Seiko's first mechanical chronograph movement, though the brand does have a chronograph that runs on their spring drive movement. The movement is finished beautifully, in line with any high-end Swiss manufacturer. You can see the Côte de Genève and the way the movement is opened up to give the wearer a view of more of the inner workings of the watch. It really is a great-looking movement. While I was at the Grand Seiko Studio Shizukushi, I was able to meet with Mr. Yuya Tanaka. Mr. Tanaka is actually responsible for helping to design many of Grand Seiko's mechanical movements, including the calibers 9SA4 and the 9SA5. The 9SC5 in the Tentagraph uses the 9SA5 as the base and adds a chronograph module under the dial. Mr. Tanaka discussed the fact that he and his team focus on even the smallest of details, including the tactile feel of the winding of the crown. Discussing the 9SA5 in particular, and as compared to the newer 9SA4, Mr. Tanaka explained that he worked with the design team to split the bridge into parts to give the movement a more dimensional and aesthetically pleasing visual appeal that the team wanted. This visual appeal extends to the Tentagraph's 9SC5 movement, and the skeletonized rotor helps to place the sole focus on the movement. My trip with Grand Seiko will go down as one of the most memorable trips I have ever been on. But to be able to meet the people responsible for not only creating the Tentagraph, but both Grand Seiko's mechanical and spring drive timepieces gives you a little bit of added perspective and appreciation. But of course, this is a review, and all of you want to know, how does the watch wear? I think it wears very well, even at its 43mm size. It's 51.5mm lug to lug and 15.3mm thick. This might seem pretty big, but like many other Grand Seiko models, the lugs curve downwards, giving it a close fit to the wrist. I didn't have any trouble wearing it on my 6.75-inch wrist. So if you're looking for a chronograph that can compete with the best of them, I would definitely recommend the Tentagraph. And if you're looking for one to accompany you on your trip to Japan, well, this Grand Seiko can't be beat. You can pick up the Tentagraph for $13,700. So what do you think of the Grand Seiko Tentagraph? And what do you think of my trip to Japan with the brand? I will definitely make sure to have a more in-depth article about my trip in the near future, so stay tuned.